Hello everybody, how are you going? And welcome to Canada's Soccer Association close to bankruptcy, something that seems weird to be talking about given the fact that both the men and the women's team have been having a boatload of success over the last few years, and even the fact that the Women's World Cup is starting tomorrow and they have a fairly good chance of doing alright in it. And so where's the disconnect there? How are they both winning and losing? Let's find out.
Canada's national teams are enjoying an unprecedented era of success, but the same can't be said for Canadian Soccer Association's finances. According to Canada Soccer's interim GM secretary, Jason DeVos, who spoke about Canada Soccer's current financial struggles on TSN, he said that the men's and women's national teams could be unable to play matches in the September international windows, and Canada Soccer could be forced to consider filing for bankruptcy.
That's crazy.
Nico, do you think of the timing of this is a little fishy? Canadian women's team wanting a new CBA, and how bad is this for the men's program with Canada set to co-host the World Cup in 2026?
Even with that, there is so much to unpack already. Firstly, I had no idea that Canada was set to be hosting the World Cup in 2026. That is only just around the corner. I'm almost surprised we don't hear more news about it, as there would already be plenty of pre-planning and stadium upgrades and logistics management and all those things going into action and working behind the scenes. As we speak now, like I said, it's just around the corner. And so for them to be already dealing with or currently dealing with financial struggles while also probably spending a boatload of money on the back end, that seems like a weird disconnect. I guess on one hand, it's probably more of a federal or provincial or state and territory budget compared to an association budget, but it still seems like a weird thing where overall, federally, I would imagine that they just need to be pumping a boatload more money into the entire sport as a whole, like so many countries do to be able to keep up with Europe, for instance. But at the same time, they're already spending a lot of money because they're already doing all the stadium upgrades. That seems like a weird thing to begin with. But then secondly, like she said, does it seem fishy that they were asking for a new, I believe she said CBA, I can't remember what CBA stands for, but a new pay award, basically. We want a certain amount of money and a certain amount of coverage and all these different things, and they've been dealing with that for quite a while. In the meanwhile, having a decent amount of success worldwide, and so to be having the numbers in terms of the wins under their belt, but then not having the backing, why is there just so many different disconnects all across the board, across the sport and everything else? And then of course the biggest kicker is
women's
this.
National teams could be unable to play matches in the September international windows.
That's outrageous to be having an international team that has been doing very, very well, let's say top 10 average, whatever it may be, but averaging decent scores, decent positions, decent ladders, and you're like, nah, we just can't make it. I also know that that isn't one of the first times we've heard about this thing. They cancelled on a team and then they had a backup team and someone cancelled on that as well. There was so many other things that came into it. It's not just the money to be able to pay to get them there, but still, to not be able to play, then you're really just diving into the whole head first because, well, that's where the money comes from winning and participating, get bums on seats and, I don't know, shirts on backs and all those kind of things.
I think the CBA negotiations definitely just brought new light to the reality of Canada's financials.
Right.
And it really seems like it's dire. That Jason DeVos interview to TSN was brutally, I don't know if honest, but it paints the picture of how much in the gutter their financials are. The fact that they're going to have to maybe skip out on friendlies, the men's in the fall in 2 windows, that they can't fly their team to play friendlies wherever it is, not even host a European camp where a lot of the players, most of the players are.
Crazy.
This all kind of just slipped out of Canada's hands. They're getting government help, like millions of dollars in help from the government, and just go back to not only these CBA negotiations with the women, but with the men's national team. They couldn't figure out a deal with Nike for new World Cup kits for Qatar 2022.
Wait, what? They couldn't? I mean, obviously there's a corporation involved in that, but you couldn't get new kits. I feel as though I see every second week in the Premier League there's a new kit, and meanwhile, it's a different thing, but international team can't get a kit together for the World Cup. Like, that's the heralded one. It's not the Premier League. It's not some random friendly like they're talking about. Yeah, okay, we can't afford to be flying you to every single thing. The actual jerseys and everything else to be able to play in the World Cup, the world stage, the world game, everything like that. You're like, nah, we just can't, we don't have the money. It all went to old Don over there, whatever it may be. Where did it all go? Like I said, they've been having a decent amount of success. I know there are plenty of Canadians that have been following the sport more than they ever have before, because they've just been going, wow, we actually have a reason to be following. It's not just, well, how much are we going to lose by this week? No, they're going, oh, are we going to win? Are we going to lose? Are we going to draw? How are the team's going to be? Oh, is that player going to be well? Who's going to be the starting team? Who's going to be on the bench? All those different questions that people are actually invested in now, and they still can't get their financials together to that degree. Like, to be getting, like I said, help, and financial help is a thing from governments. It happens all around the world. That's a thing. It happens. Whatever. But for them to still be getting that and then still not be able to afford to even fly the team around, like, yeah, let's say you're taking 40 people between the team and the coaches and the managers and maybe some other people, 50, I don't know, however many would be. You can bust a whole bundle, I'm sure, depending on where they're going. Maybe make an area where the other team can come and join you so it's a little bit cheaper. But for even that, to be having millions and millions of dollars and then still be going, nah, we can't afford to be flying people for a couple $1,000 ticket or whatever it may be. That's interesting. Where is all of it going?
It's very CONCACAF-y. I would expect it to happen to a lower powerhouse, but we're talking about Canada. They're hosting the World Cup in 2026, and the fact that this is going on, it's rough to see. I don't know. They mentioned bankruptcy.
They've been really open about it, though. When we were at Nations League, I attended the press conferences for Canada, and John Herdman spoke about how they couldn't get together and have a proper camp like they wanted to, that every team had organized themselves, and what was it? The U.S. had 7 days in California before they came to Las Vegas, and they didn't have the opportunity or the funds to do so. And he was they really talked about the financial situation, so that's something that they've been extremely open about. We talked about the women being Olympic winners and them not getting the support that they need financially, and then the men's not being able to play those preparation matches is just...
It's just outrageous. What is she going to say?
It's a struggle.
A struggle. Well, yeah, that's also true as well. A struggle, outrageous, baffling is also another word that comes to mind. Just all those different things are going, yes, like she said, Olympic champions. Men's doing very well as well for themselves. And then they can't even organize these things. I just would love to know. Surely there has to be some kind of explanation or even just some background check. It's just, okay, this bank, where did that money go? That $20 million, it went to here, here, and here. Oh, it went to, wait, who's that random person? Or who's that? Oh, jerseys of this, Nike took that, whatever it may be. You go, okay, that's all fair enough. And then there's one random one and you go, hang on, what's happening here? Or maybe there's not a random one. Maybe it's just things are stupidly expensive. What is it? I mean, I know that domestic flights in Canada, everyone always says is very expensive. It's not like even Europe or, I don't know, the States, I'm sure has some fairly cheap domestic flights as well. But on the scale of these kind of federations, especially if you're backed by FIFA, one of the biggest corporations in the world, realistically, and you can't afford it. Like I said, you were the Olympic champions, you were doing very well, you're putting bums on seats, you're spreading the word all across an entirely new nation in terms of it wasn't really followed. It had ice hockey, it had baseball, it had all those things, and they're going, wow, we can actually have a bigger audience. That is something that I would have thought that FIFA themselves, I mean, maybe not step in because they don't generally do that kind of thing, but I don't know, just how can they wangle it just to go, okay, we need to be helping you because you're hosting it in a couple of years' time and you're about to just dip out of the scene entirely. Even the fact that they were saying they weren't able to organize, or I guess the funds weren't allowing them to organize any training days and camps and all those kind of things. I mean, that is the basics. That's like under eights kind of stuff. If you're maybe not at that level, but just training, that's all they're trying to get, but they can't even get that. Is it just the accommodation, like they said, flights? But you don't even have to be flying people, just bus them around, car them around, get them to drive to one singular location domestically, and then go from there. It doesn't have to be multi-billion-dollar deals.
The struggle.
How did it get this
question
bad? How did it get to this point?
For some reason, it's just like Canada and bad with money doesn't fit in my brain. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a stereotype about Canadians, but I just, for them to get this far where they're like, no, now we're in bankruptcy. And there were signs when they didn't get the kit for the new season. Yeah. There should have been something more made about that so that people could be a bit more prepared for the situation we're in. And also, you know, people forget that the soccer federations are not a government function. Right? U.S. soccer is not a part of the U.S. government. It's its own entity. But you would hope that there's who are some of the biggest names in Canada that can maybe come to the rescue for these two teams, the men and the women that are doing incredibly well. This is their golden generation. This is an opportunity for both teams.
They should do a fundraiser?
No, I'm saying Drake should let them use his private jet, is what I'm really saying.
I mean, maybe. Why not? At that rate, I mean, Drake's completely loaded. He seems to have well more money than any of these guys, and not talking about the people on the panel, but any of the Canadian football associations. I mean, even the fact that they're going, okay, maybe you can get a sponsor, is what I thought they were going to be talking about. Maybe, what is it, Canadian cars or, I don't know, maple syrup even. I mean, they've got the maple leaf on their flag. Surely, I don't know the brand of syrup, but if the brand of syrup were to step up and give a sponsorship label, whatever, big thing on the back, whatever it be, can you imagine the money? Like they said, they've got a golden era of promotional, but just generally winning and all those kind of people. And if you can be the brand that is associated with that, you would think that that would be just golden advertising. It'd be the golden era for the golden advertising. It'd be as simple as that. I mean, you don't want to be just funding a sinking ship, but they wouldn't be a sinking ship if they had the business behind them. It's not like the fact that they're going downhill and they've just been always going downhill and they never have any wins. No, they just need some hulls to actually make them float instead of just trying to swim for all eternity. But what does he mean by Canada and bad with money doesn't fit in my brain? Because then, as we heard, he talks about it being a Canadian stereotype, but is that Canadians are good with money or bad with money? Because he said it doesn't compute. So I can only imagine that Canadians are generally, from that, deemed to be quite good with their money. But I'm sure that's just too broad of a stereotype to ever cast. Like, what are you comparing it to? It's an entire country. It's an entire populace. You can't say that a country's good with money. I wouldn't say it. You're going to have bad eggs and good eggs. It's as simple as that. And so for federations, is he talking about that? For companies, businesses? I mean, even like you said, the Canadian Football Association isn't directly linked to the Canadian government. So even if there was some stereotype about, the Canadian government is horrible with money, I mean, I'm sure depending on who you talk to, someone will say that, and that's going to be the same worldwide. But it's not even that link, because it's two separate entities. It's not like they have complete and utter control over it. Yes, you were playing at a national league, you're representing your country, but you're not funded directly by the country. Not in that kind of way. There's so many other things in the revenue stream. So, like she said, and I'm glad she asked, how did it get this bad? Please enlighten me, because even Australian soccer has been, in the grand scheme of things, down in the dumps for a while. We had one player, Timmy Cahill, and everyone else has just been doing all right. Obviously, we have the Matildas, and we have all these different things that are starting to pick it back up. The women's are doing quite well, and the men's are just continuing to kind of potter along and just be in the game sort of thing. Not crazy like anything else that Canada's really receiving, but still, they've never really died out completely. Some broadcast rights have been going a bit astray, and they're not a prioritized sport, but they're not filing for bankruptcy.
Drake, come on, you got Air Drake, bro.
Drake, Bieber.
Air Drake.
What other Canadians can
Celine Dion.
Celine Dion.
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds.
Wrexham.
Van City Reynolds.
So
Be a hero.
So something we like you said, it being a private entity or not necessarily coming from the government fully, this money, that was a big question that I had for Nico. It's like, how do the national teams make money? One of the things that I'm coming to understand is that when the Canada situation, it's something to do with the TV rights. They sold TV rights for like 10 years a while ago, as opposed to selling them in more pieces, which would make them more money across
Sounds like Barcelona.
timing, across a long time, as opposed to. So they had a ton of money when they first got the deal, and then they haven't been. But there's
Poor
more research to do about
It is.
I don't know if you can call it poor administration, because I'm sure someone reviewed the entire deal and it was deemed to be best at the time. But if you're dealing with it 10 years ago and you're going, I mean, we need this money. We really are down in the dumps. There hasn't been much success in ages. So anyone that's going to be broadcasting us just makes sense. And then, since then you just get a little bit of success and you go, oh no, now we're worth way more, but we've already signed on the dotted line. You go, I don't really know what we can do about this. We've already done it. Maybe they could have done it a bit better, but that's all the matter of hindsight. Like I was saying, you were suddenly done much better compared to a decade ago. And yes, he said something about Barcelona. I don't know the story there. Maybe it's a story that has occurred before and people should have known better. But perhaps it's the fact that the deal wouldn't have gone ahead at all if it wasn't for a decade-long contract. Maybe they would have been filing for bankruptcy 9 years ago because they were just completely in the dumps then and they just got dragged out by that. It makes sense why they might have been able to just take that money and run with it. Just go, okay, we need something to stay afloat for now and hopefully things change. And I mean, we don't really expect this or expect that. And then it did though. That's the problem there, and that's just all hindsight. So I understand what they're saying, that it maybe could have been done better, but it's a bit of an unfair comment to say unless there was some miraculous kind of sightseer and plenty of history from other teams doing a very similar, silly, if you want to call that, mistake.
The fact that we're just suddenly at this point, I feel like we weren't talking about
No, and then it was like, wait, what?
downward
Bankruptcy?
spiral of the Canadian Football Federation, right? The FA is suddenly like, oh, there's a possibility of filing for
Is
bankruptcy.
this a negotiation tactic?
For the CBA?
That would be wild.
Would it?
That would be crazy.
Wild.
No one's ever done that in the sport. Come on.
We love a conspiracy theory.
Oh, I wonder. I mean, it sounds so dodgy, but there are plenty of stories, even within just this singular sport that we're talking about here, that I'm sure that there are plenty of things like that, let alone when you just step outside of it into other sports as well. I mean, like I said, it's the world game. There is so much money around, just floating everywhere. You just need to somehow sign the right deal and dotted line to be able to just grab all of it, basically, is how it seems to work. But if they're just mixing it up in there, just going, how can we maybe just show that we don't have the money to be able to do all this, or whatever it may be? I feel as though there's just too much evidence that you would have to provide when filing for bankruptcy or anything like that would then come out of the woodwork that then you would get caught out in your own lie. I mean, I guess there were so many cover-ups, but it doesn't seem worth it. If you were filing for bankruptcy, so you're kind of terminating all your contracts, why bother? Just do it. Just go bankrupt instead of screwing everyone around in the process downhill. Regardless of whatever is actually happening in that situation, though, I do think that it is strange for them to suddenly come out and just go, we're bankrupt, or we're filing for bankruptcy, or anything like that, to not go, okay, guys, we're really getting close here. Okay, we're pushing the limit. Okay, we're about to fall off the cliff, and then actually go down this step. To go, I mean, they did say there might have been signs when they couldn't get the deal together to get a World Cup jersey kit. That's it, just weird, though. I mean, who's paying for that? Surely Nike are sponsoring that or providing it. That's kind of like a mutual exchange of, okay, we have our product on the world stage on a quite a successful team. That's how I thought that would work. But I guess if they can't pay that and they can't get a new kit, so they had to use the old one, there are a few different red flags that are going on there. Sadly, it's actually for a red team. But I just don't think you can pinpoint it on one thing, and we will see how this plays out over the next little while. I don't know if the women's team have a new or an old or anything kit for the 2023 World Cup down in Sydney, but man, it will be interesting to see how they perform, because if they can perform well, maybe they can help drag it out a little bit better, but they've already been doing that, so why is it down in the dumps? I would love to know. Please let me know what is going on with this entire federation, because these guys provided a bit of context surrounding the entire thing that I otherwise would not have known, but I'm sure there are plenty of people that can also provide heaps more. So feel free to let me know what is going on with the Canadian Soccer Association.